Ready?
Yep, let's do it.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Mykie Stiller, and I am so excited to be here with you for this Protege interview with Bill Banta. Bill is one of my favorite people. He has been a student of Bob's for, gosh, I don't know, tell us in just a minute. And he is one of the insights that he has. Bill, how are you doing?
Thanks. Hey, how are you? I'm doing well, Mykie. Thanks. It's a great opportunity.
Thanks for joining me, Bill. Can you start just by telling us where you started in this journey of personal development?
Yeah, sure. Back in 1993, I was in a network marketing business, and I was one of those guys that had a lot of ego and pride, and we were struggling financially, and I really didn't even want to build that business. And so Bob Proctor actually spoke on a stage there, and for the first time in a couple of years of listening to all these different trainers and coaches on human potential speak, it just stood out to me. I actually found him in the hallway, and he gave me his book, You Were Born Rich. And he signed it, and he told me I should come to Arizona, that he could help me if I'd come to Arizona. And so I actually borrowed money, flew to Arizona, and went to the Science of Getting Rich conference that he had in Scottsdale. And to be honest with you, I took my brother with me, partly because he could pay half the fee, and he came with, and we both sat in that conference. And it changed my life forever. And that was in '93. By about '96, after doing a few mentoring courses that Bob had, we were well on our way to just changing circumstance, because I was no longer involved in circumstance. And so that's where my journey started. Followed Bob all the way into the 2000s, and just enjoyed more prosperity and developing the capacity to understand how to be successful. After growing up in a home, amazing people, good family, good brothers, sisters, parents, grandparents, good people, but very kind of struggling in the financial way of life. And Bob just told me, he said, when I was young, he said, you could continue to think that way, or you could just trust me and I could teach you to be different. And so that's kind of our journey. And here I am today in 2010. I got really excited about being in the coaching and training industry, and kind of opened that door, which led me back to Bob and Proctor Gallagher Institute. And here I am.
Thanks, Bill. And give me a snapshot of how your results have changed. So you gave us this a little glimpse, but give us a little bit bigger of a glimpse.
Well, when I first met Bob, I was probably earning $18,000 to $20,000 a year, and maybe working 60 to 80 hours. I was a painter, and I was painting houses. I grew up in a home where labor was really the primary focus. You just were told, trade your time for dollars, be happy with what you have. So as far as my personal results, I think within 3 years, our monthly income was more than what we were making as an annual income. And I really attribute that, honestly, to the process of growth. Now, of course, years and years later, we're enjoying a life of freedom. We're home. I'm spending time with my 2 teenagers that are here at the house still with us, and traveling. And just as important as that, I'm working and surrounded in an environment with highly motivated, highly successful people. And I just believe that when you raise your children, and when you develop with the family values that I personally have, when you develop them in an atmosphere and an environment of success, it changes the whole destiny and the legacy of your family. And I feel that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm working in an environment. My results have changed dramatically financially. Probably more cash flow, more opportunity, more freedom than I've ever experienced.
Thanks, Bill. And whenever you were telling us your story, you talked about how you were dissatisfied. And Bob talks about how dissatisfaction is a healthy state to be in. And so I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about dissatisfaction and why what you do with dissatisfaction can be a really great thing for your success.
That's an awesome question. There was something inside of me at a very young age that said that what I was doing wasn't enough. And I could never decipher what that really meant. I didn't understand, but I could feel it. And every time I would do something in my life that I thought was a success, I just had this feeling, no, you can do better. You can do better. So I guess that inner voice, that feeling of I should be doing better. And I honestly can tell you that I believe that dissatisfaction is what's really pushed me throughout my adult life to realize that my potential I was limiting it by so far, and really not performing at a level that I believe God created me to perform at. And every single time, even now, with the success and the things that we're gaining in our lives with my family and my wife and I still realize I've only scratched the surface. And I was with Bob in Hawaii a few months ago, and I was standing in this hotel, and I was looking out of this glass window over the Pacific Ocean, and just the blue, vibrant, with the green, lush things that were in front of us. And Bob was standing next to me, and he put his arm around me, and he said, "Isn't it amazing?" And I said, "Oh, it's incredible." I said, "This is the coolest thing I've ever seen." He said, "You know what?" He said, "There's always better." And it helped me to realize the importance of staying on a pattern of growth. And so dissatisfaction, to me, if we use it correctly and don't use it from an ungrateful or an unhumble place, as long as we stay really grateful for what we've been blessed with, and we use dissatisfaction to drive us, it's amazing the things that we can accomplish that we didn't even know we could just a short time ago.
Thanks, Bill. I could not agree with you more. And you've worked with thousands of our clients over the years. You're one of Bob and Sandy's top coaches, personally trained by. Now, can you tell me, when you're talking to our clients, I'm sure that there's some common themes, and I was hoping you could share, what is it that's holding most people back?
Yeah, what holds most people back, in fact, I think what's holding me back is, number one, not really being willing to admit where they are. I had to first figure out where I was at, like just finally humble myself to say, okay, I'm here. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest things that hold most clients back. Two, if you don't know where you're going, it's hard to get there, right? Everything starts with a desire. And in fact, Napoleon Hill said that desire is the first lap in the race. You have to have something that drives you, that's causes you to get out of bed in the morning, that wakes you up like a child at Christmas, and that's willing to just, not sleep at all. I remember being that way as a child. And when you really figure out what you want, after you've established, okay, I'm here and I have to grow, then that gap between where you are and where you want to be, it's shorter. And so I think it's so important for a client to realize, just figure out where you're at and then make a decision where you're going, because without a location, you're not going to get there.
And where do you see mentorship and guidance fitting into that?
I don't think you'll do it without it. I think that each one of us personally, as we're raised in a society and cultures with families and generational programming, we just don't see those things that we don't see, those blind spots. And I remember years ago, Bob telling me, he just said that successful people have mentors. Successful people have mentors for really one reason, and that's accountability and guidance through the blind spots that you just don't see. I look at our company that I'm associated with you and with the team, and the explosion of growth that we focus on here, by holding each other accountable, and with the blind spots that we're not able to see. It's fascinating to see a common person come off the street, a client, myself, anybody, even you. When we understand those small things that we cannot see for ourselves, it's fascinating how fast we can grow and what our potential really is.
I totally agree with you. And I was talking with Chris Murray earlier, and we talked about how whenever you're trying to do things yourself, it's hard to gain momentum because you are going at such a slow pace and you're experiencing setbacks because you don't know what those blind spots are, that it's deflating. And so it's not that you can't do it yourself. It's that it takes so much longer because you don't ever gain the real momentum that you could if you had someone right there with you, telling you, what step to take next and helping you along the way. Someone who's been there, who's an expert.
Mykie, Bob said to a group of people just not very long ago, he said that when you self-study, he said you could be adding 3, 5, 15 years longer than you would if you do it with a professional mentoring company. And he said, and it's because of those layers of virus code. You just do not see it. And momentum takes a few minutes it takes time to create. And when you're in a mentoring environment, it speeds it up dramatically.
I love that. Now, Bill, you've been to countless seminars over the years, both as a client. You came to Science of Getting Rich, some of our 3-day seminars. You also came to Matrix as a paying client before ever joining the Proctor Gallagher Institute. You've also been through all of our programs. And I'd love to know what it was that made the biggest difference for you, some of the things that really helped you take a quantum leap and get to the next level. And I know you've had several over the last, I was doing the math, I think it's 25 years now. So I'm sure you've had several quantum leaps, several paradigm shifts over the last 25 years, but can you give us just a few of them, a few big ones, and what it was that really like springboarded you?
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm just learned over the last 25 years that there's just really 3 basic components, that we really need, and that's confidence and a conviction, a direction, and then obedience to the rules of this process, obedience to the laws Bob talks about. And I know that sounds basic, but the truth is probably the first quantum leap that I can recall that's made a huge difference, probably more even in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, is my self-confidence and self-image. Often Sandy will stand on stage and she'll say, you never outperform your own self-image, right? And I believe that when a person can work on confidence, and it's a process, it's an acquired skill, it's something that you just don't naturally have. Some people, it appears that they do, but it doesn't mean that they really do on the inside. When you truly study with the intention of absolute focused attention on confidence and self-image, when I stopped worrying about what other people thought of me, and I started to realize that if I was good with me, that you would be good with me. And that I gained respect rather than just always trying to be friends with everybody. It was this burden lifted off my shoulders beyond anything I can describe. And I think that that's one. And again, knowing where I was going, having desire, if you're going to talk about a quantum leap, everything starts with desire. And when we know what we want and we focus on that with confidence, we do attract to us those people, tools, and those resources that are necessary for us to bring that into fruition. And third, it's finally understanding through study and being in the right environment with mentors and coaches. I have the top mentors in the world. There's nobody else in this business outside of the laws, the rules of success. And it's okay to read it and study it, but when you learn how to apply it and it becomes natural, everything starts to win. So those 3 areas, I believe, are some of the biggest quantum leaps I've ever had.
I love that, and I want to break it down even further. And you talked about confidence. And so there's the confidence in yourself, but there's also confidence in the decisions that you're making. And I know whenever you're making a new decision or you're stepping out and you're betting on yourself and you're going into unfamiliar territory, there is a little bit of you that might be unsure or hesitant. So can you talk a little bit about borrowing confidence in those scenarios?
Wow, that's so cool. In 1993 or 94, I don't remember, I met Bob at a conference again, and I was trying to make a decision to start a new business. And I was so afraid, and I was being so controlled by my past. I had this mechanical attitude where I just kept looking over my shoulder and looking at failure and looking at my history, my family shoulder. And he said, look, until you can believe yourself, just believe in me believing in you. And that is so huge, to have borrowed confidence, right? Because again, if we're not going to be able to create anything of really any consequence by ourselves, what other choice do we have but to either borrow somebody's confidence and move, or we stay where we're at? It's just, there's no other rule. We either conform to our circumstances and pay that price, or we pay the price of freedom. Either one of them hurt, either one of them scare the daylights out of us. But the fact is that the other one, especially by borrowed confidence, and that's all I've ever done is borrowed confidence. I look at even my journey here with Bob and Arash and working around people like yourself and in this culture. It's incredible to actually use that. Success is really not this crazy secret. It's really just a process and a system. That's all it really is. And so I hope that answered your question the way you wanted to, because I'm convinced that that's the only way I believe I've developed confidence is by borrowing confidence.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like we are in such a unique position because we have the privilege of watching our clients transform on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. And, we see clients come to an event and then come back to an event 3 years later, and they now have a multi-million-dollar business. I mean, these are stories that we're hearing all the time. And so it's really easy for us to have confidence in our material and in Bob and Sandy's programs and in what we're doing. And so like you and I and Araj and Chris and our whole team are great people to borrow confidence from, because we've seen this work over and over and over again.
Yeah, and
oh, go ahead.
I was saying, we're just common people. I mean, Bob tells your story from the stage. He calls you a nanny, and I was a house painter, and Arash was a salesman, and so was Chris. I mean, normal people that walked off the stage of life and trusted somebody, and it's scary because we only really have today. We can see the future, but we really only have today. But that's why I love the psychological piece of watching people succeed, because I know if I can, that somebody will. I just know.
One of the other things that you said, Bill, was about obedience. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about how Bob always says, let yourself accept an idea. So let yourself accept that these ideas are foolproof. Let yourself accept that these ideas will work. Can you just talk a little bit more about that and go a little bit more in depth on that idea?
Yeah, Bob always talks about, I mean, everything is about the law and not luck. And when we really allow ourselves to be with the idea, just recently at Matrix, he said, if you can think the idea, if your conscious mind will allow you to think the idea, then you have every right and every ability to achieve that. And so letting yourself accept it, it's just allowing yourself to say yes and stepping across that threshold of, well, what if it doesn't happen? Or will this really work for me? Just if you can think it and you can see it in your mind, otherwise the very creator of this universe would have not allowed you to see that vision or that feeling had you not had the ability to achieve it. And so letting it happen really with ease is something that I've really personally worked on, Mykie, is just accepting the idea. And somebody say, well, how do you accept it? You just do. And then you borrow confidence from somebody who's an advocate, who really, it matters whether you win or not. I couldn't go to people in my family and say, hey, I'm going to be this. I was always going to be shot down. And so I had to accept the idea, which, again, because I had mentors and coaches, it was easier for me to accept. But if I can see an idea, then I can hold it in my mind. All I have to do is just accept that it's mine. I may never know how I'm going to get there. Most of the times we don't, but just accept it and be it. And it really, I love when Bob says, absolutely, just be as loose as ashes. Just be calm and let things flow to you. Don't think that they're going to run away. Just accept it.
We talk about letting ourselves accept the idea, and I want to talk about how that's not just a one-time thing. Like, that's a process. And so, several times a day, every day, every week, every month, you have to let yourself be it. It's a choice over and over and over that I'm not getting. And really, it's just a series of really small decisions and, really diligent habits that you create over time that are the real secret to success. And could you talk just a little bit about that?
Absolutely. 2 weeks ago, I was sitting with Bob just by ourselves, and we were talking about this. And I said, hey, do you ever have that committee show up in your mind? That chatter, that, oh my gosh, is this really going to work? Or is this decision right? Or the whole wake up on Monday mornings with that knot in your stomach, like, I got to start the week again, And it was the coolest thing, because Bob just leaned back in his chair and he said, all the time. And I said, well, what do you do? And he said, I just don't pay any attention to it. I just ignore it. He said, I just move into routine. I move into action. I move away from that thought. I don't give it any energy. And so I know that those people that are listening to what you and I are talking about today, I guarantee they all wake up those days with that feeling of anxiety and the mind, that monkey mind, the chatter going on, because we all do. And I think to have a routine every single morning is incredibly important. For me, I visualize. I like to wake up, and before I hit the carpet, I like to see myself as a success. I want to prepare myself mentally. I talk to myself. You know, I think Napoleon Hill's the one that said you have to play a legitimate game with your mind. So I do that. So my routine is really simple, and I think it's so important. So I visualize. If I'm out for an exercise or a walk, I love listening to audios because it programs from a thinking standpoint. I'm processing, I'm thinking, and I always study, think, visualize, dream with my goal in mind. I never just sit back here and go into autopilot when it comes to that. I know writing's a huge part. We were on a training call this morning, and Arash was even saying how he was helping somebody write a goal at the gym the other day, and this person, he had so automatically writes his goal so much that instead of writing the person's goal for them, he wrote his goal. And he said, I knew at that moment that I was going to receive that goal. He said, I knew, because it was so automated in my thinking. And he said within about 2 months, he had manifested that exact goal. And so that routine's so important. But, you know, study. I've seen clients that will call and say, "God, I'm studying 4 or 5 hours a day," and they're really frustrated and nothing's changing. And I'll tell you, people can overstudy too without action. And so Bob, you know, has always taught just simple. I visualize. I do self-suggestion that now turns into auto-suggestion. I have a routine. I like to write out my goal. And several times throughout the day, I will pick up a book and I'll read 15, 20 minutes a day is all. But I probably spend at least an hour. But I think the most critical part of the day is in the morning. That if you're going to have a successful day, you have to wake up prepared to have a successful day. And to do it carrying the load of yesterday and all the stuff going on in your mind, it's not going to happen. You know, so you really want to start with a clear mind and a focus on your goal and an absolute self-talk, and then step out of bed and just go do it.
A lot of what you're talking about, Bill, is decision and commitment and persistence, which doesn't sound really exciting or fun, but it is what works. And I want to know how you keep from getting lazy. And let's say that you have a lazy day or a lazy week. How do you rebound from that?
Wow. That's so simple to do too. I mean, you can really get on cruise control. You know, you start to do well, things are kind of cooking along, and it's easy to hit cruise control. It just comes absolutely down, period, to your desire. And until you have a desire, you won't make a decision. I wake up every single morning because I have one place to be in 3 years, period. And I know exactly what it looks like. I know exactly where I'll be. I know exactly what the bank account looks like. Have I always been that way? No. To me, this is probably the hardest thing in the world to do. Wallace Wattles even said that in The Science of Getting Rich. He said it's the hardest and most laborious work we'll do. But once again, what price are we willing to pay? We either conform to our circumstances and have a lazy day or 2 or 6 or 12, or we pay that price of saying, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to discipline myself. I've made a decision. I'm going to start this business. I'm going to go on a weight loss program, extra, whatever it is. I'm going to earn $1 million this year. And then when the committee and the monkey mind shows up and starts to chatter, you just have to just say no. But if the desire is not big enough, you're not going after it. And so I think that decision comes when you have a desire. And it's scary sometimes. But when your desire to have what you want in your life, if it's backed by family and backed by purpose, is big enough, doesn't matter. You will step out and you will find the way to do it. And you look at everything in our lives. I mean, the beautiful home that you live in, that was a decision, and it wasn't easy because it was a bigger step than where you came from, right? And I just think that it's so important to make a decision and just trust yourself that you'll figure it out along the way.
Bill, one of the biggest paradigm shifts that I ever had was the importance of choosing what I wanted for my life more than what I want right now. So that, like, kind of putting what I want right now on the back burner for what I really want long term. And I was hoping that you could talk about that, because I know that this is like one thing that I feel like you're an expert in.
Man, I'll tell you, I was reading a book not long ago by Robert Russell, and he talked about It's not the physical things of the moment we should have. It's the capacity to have. And if we don't grow and become the person that can have even that temporary goal that you talked about, that in the now, it's always going to be just outside of our reach. And 1 year and 2 year and 3 years goes by. I mean, I look at it now and we are August and it feels like we just put the Christmas tree away. And life happens so fast. And I think that you have to buy off on something that's so big. And if you're not willing, as Bob would say, able and willing to do what it takes to achieve your goal, then you probably would never get there. And again, that's something that has to be taught. We have to learn how to do this, Mykie. I from my own experience, it's something that has to be trained into us. And it's so important because you can't do it alone. But if we're willing to give up a little bit of time and sacrifice to be mentored, to be coached, to say that my long-term goal is this, or whatever it might be, give up on the eating to have a better body. The sacrifice, there's always reward. As we know, the opposite of where we at or where we are today is exactly how we want it to be. And so that's the rule. That's the law. When we give up something, we gain something.
Thanks, Bill. And I feel like one of the things that really sets us apart is paradigms and the teaching of paradigms at a really deep level. And I know that paradigm and paradigm shift are buzzwords right now. I feel like I'm hearing them everywhere, especially in the last 12 months or so. But no one in the world teaches paradigms and paradigm shifts like Bob and Sandy. It's really unique, but it's also really life-changing. And so I'd love to hear your glimpse on paradigms and a paradigm shift.
Yeah, that's so cool, because if you think of a paradigm or a multitude of habits, and then you look back, and we all can do it. When I cough, when I laugh, I hear my Father, right? I hear him, like he's in me. And it's a good thing because he's a great man. And then I see things, I mean, we are so disposed to that progression just generationally. And these paradigms, this conditioning, they're like wolves on the doorstep. And they will keep us locked into a pattern. And all we have to do is look at cultural in families and how everything really plays out. Most people are the same. And so I view a paradigm as this habitual routine, this pack of wolves on my doorstep that's guarding the door and won't let me out. That says, no, you need to stay like these people. And what I discovered is that mentoring and coaching, self-study, and a daily process actually starves the wolf. And he's not going to live there forever. If he's hungry, he will go somewhere else. And as he leaves my doorstep, I become Mr. Habit, Mr. Wolf, or paradigm. It opens up an entirely different mentality. I remember Bob told me, he said, look, you have a money paradigm. You are really conditioned to think like somebody who earns $30,000 a year. And it's not easy to be told those things because it's frustrating when ego's in the way. But I remember him telling me, he said, look, every time you spend $1, I want you to tell yourself you earn 3. He said, so I started playing a game. I'd go to the gas pump and I'd put it in there, and there's $1. That means $4, $8, $12. And I started playing that game. And I started, every time I would write a check, I wrote a check to the dentist one day and it was $1,200. And I in my mind, and I said it out loud, this is awesome. I just earned $4,800. And I looked down and the clerk was looking at me like I was nuts. But I had programmed myself to believe that every time. So that habit of being so stuck in a financial lack and limitation, Mykie, is really what I'm talking about. It's a habit. Earning money is a habit. Thinking freedom is a habit. And whatever our habits are, we bring to pass in our life. And so when we starve the wolf, the habit, the paradigm, and it goes away, we can open the door and we can free ourselves.
I think a lot of times we're unwilling to even look or definitely admit we're stuck at $20,000 a year or $50,000 a year or $100,000 a year or $1 million a year. Stuck is stuck, and it might look different for everybody, but it feels the same. And everybody has paradigms, everybody has habits. And so I was hoping that you talk a little bit about how it might look different, but you still have to overcome it. And overcoming is the same every time.
Yeah, it's the same exact process. I mean, I have clients that I've worked with that 5 years ago took themselves from just hardly any success in their life and frustration to coming back now saying, "Oh, I'm just as stuck," and they're earning 100,000 a month, and I think that it always looks the same. I heard a talk one time that said that life is a series of plateaus, and that the only way we get to a new plateau is through development and growth. But when you get to a plateau, there's only really one or two people that ever recognize the next plateau in life is the development. And everybody else, there's two other people, they stay stuck there. And I think that's a big part of society. They get to a spot and then they stay stuck, but they intellectually and emotionally know there's a better place to go. They can feel that drive, but they really don't ever take the time to develop themselves to understand. I mean, you'll hear Bob say, you're earning 100,000 a year because you're not aware of how to earn 100,000 a month. Well, that's the next plateau. You have to develop yourself or the capacity. So, and I think the other person is one who falls off and goes backwards because they're not willing to overcome the tendency to go back like that, like looking back all the time. And I've done that. I've went forward, backwards, and it's a hard trap because it does affect your confidence and your self-image. So it is the exact same process if you're going from 20,000 a year to 20,000 a month, as releasing weight, as learning to drive a car. It is really so simple, yet it's incredibly and emotionally taxing if you don't understand the process. But when you do, and it's a system, then it's no big deal.
Bill, you talked about taking those steps backwards, and I feel like every time that I've done that, where I've gotten closer to where I want, and then I take a couple steps backwards, it's with an exhale or it's with complacency. So I'm forgetting what it was that got me there, whether, in success, it's doing the daily gratitude and reading my goal card and doing the affirmations and listening to my coaching programs. And I start making some momentum. Maybe I get, I reach one goal and then I exhale and I fall off from doing those things. Or working on a diet, you're trying to lose 10 pounds and you lose 7, you're gaining momentum, you're following this plan, and then you get a little cocky or complacent and you exhale and go back to where you were. So I was hoping you could talk just a little bit about that.
Boy, that to me is probably the most discouraging part of a paradigm, the frustration, right? Is to realize that it's all self-induced. But when I first met Arash back in, I don't even know, he described this to me, because this is the exact question I asked him. Why do I go here and then I come back here? So frustrating, even after years of studying with Bob. And he said, picture the thermostat on your wall, the thing that controls the temperature in your home. And he described it. He said, if it's set at a temperature, we'll just say 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and you open the doors and you let all the hot air in, what's the thermostat going to do? And so, of course, it's going to turn on. And he said, well, what happens if you leave the door open? It's going to continue to run, because it wants to bring the house to 70 degrees. Well, what happens when you close the door? Well, and I was telling him, within a few minutes, it's going to say, hey, we're back to 70 degrees. It sends a message to the air conditioner and it shuts itself off. That's what we do. We have to learn to recognize there's a thermostat. Maxwell Maltz calls it a cybernetic mechanism. We have to learn how to really understand that, like you said, that 7 pounds, get a little cocky. Oh, I can have pizza tonight. I can, just once won't hurt. But what's happening is you've like the thermostat, you've closed the doors to the home. It's now catching itself back up, and we will fly right back to where we were, because it is cut into us as a programming so deep. And once again, it takes a respectful amount of time and effort to rid ourselves of those virus codes. I have no idea how I would have ever done that without having mentors to point it out and say, whoa, you're going backwards again. Because I wasn't even seeing it, Mykie. Like, I couldn't even see it. and then you wake up 10 pounds heavy and you're going, what the heck, you know? So
That's
yeah,
so
yeah, you've got to just take the thermostat off the wall, put it in the garbage, and learn how to set your point to a new higher level. Otherwise, you will float right back there.
That is so good. I have two more questions for you. And the first one is, I imagine that how you start your day has changed significantly, certainly from 1993 when you were first introduced to this material to today, but several times over the year, I would imagine, or over the years. What does how you start your day look like right now?
For me, when I wake up, I like to spend 5 to 10 minutes. I always go to sleep, so backing up, I always go to sleep with an idea of what I want to accomplish the next day. I think it just gives my mind something to focus on during the night. When I wake up, I like to just calmly lay there. I don't get up. I just lay there for a few minutes, and I just simply relax, close my eyes. I see my day as if it's complete. I focus on my 1, 3, and 5-year goals. And for me, I operate on a daily basis, even on my 5-year goal. I just do what I can do today, but I know that it's adding up to the stairs to lead to my 5-year or 3-year goal. But I see myself. I actually feel myself like living there. I see myself having the conversation with my family. I see ourselves maybe on the beach or whatever that's in part of my goal. And then I like to go spend time by myself, exercising on the treadmill, or I walk, and I listen to an audio every day. Every day. I listen to something Bob's teaching. I'll listen to an audio book. Like right now, I'm studying a You Too Can Be Prosperous book. And so I listen to a chapter, then I come home and I read the same chapter. I prepare myself for work. I come to my desk and I literally just spend 5 minutes and I rewrite my goals. And then I pray for the understanding of how to serve and help people, how to do my job, my opportunity better. And you could apply that if you were a hairdresser, if you were working at a restaurant, if you owned a bubblegum manufacturer. It doesn't matter. It's having yourself set up for success and start every day to dominate, every day to succeed. And I just like I said before, it's a decision, and it's going to feel fake in the beginning when you start this. It's not going to feel right. It's out of harmony with the set point. So that's what I do. Throughout my day, I do read here and there. And I think environment plays such an incredible role. And so the way you start your morning in the environment, where are you at, how your desk looks at work, what is your environment with your family. I think if we could do anything at all to make our environment more in harmony with our goal, it speeds up our process.
I could not agree on anything you could share with us is, let's say everyone watching this video could take away one thing to create results right now. There's one thing they could implement to change their life or improve their life, even just a little bit. What would that be?
Just absolutely understand where you are and then determine where you want to go, and just allow yourself to have confidence. Just tell yourself, I'm confident. I am confident. I trust myself. And I think that is so critical, Mykie, is just to have the confidence to say no to the way things are today, and not even knowing where you're going to go, but just have confidence. And it's such an easy thing to say, yet it's one of the hardest things we do, is to have confidence. But we can create it, especially if we communicate to ourselves and if we can trust that feeling inside. So I think confidence is huge. It's something that has to be earned. You have to learn how to do it, but it's so worth. And if that's all any of our clientele ever did, is just gain confidence, their world would be drastically different.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you for joining me today. I really appreciated being able to interview you, and thanks for sharing all your insights.
Yeah, thank you. We'll see you real soon.
All right.